Hi, everyone. We thank you for joining us today. Letting you know as you file in, you are in the right place. This is the Safety and Health Magazine webinar sponsored by ProcessMAP. Going to get things going in about 1 minute from now. Again, we say hello and welcome everyone, letting you know you're in the right place as you get logged on. Going to get the webinar going in about 30 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast, Avoiding EHS Pitfalls, OSHA, Engagement, and KPIs, sponsored by ProcessMAP. My name is Kevin Drewley. I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health Magazine, and will be moderating today's session. Thanks for joining us. In a few minutes, we'll start a presentation, but first, let's review some preliminary items. The views of today's speakers and organizations are their own and may not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not necessarily mean the council or magazine endorses those items. At the end of today's webcast, we'll conduct a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and click the send button. Feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the question and answer session to begin. I'll try to answer as many questions as possible today, but because of the large number of participants, we may not get to every question. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded along to today's speakers. At the end of the webcast, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey. We'll let you know more about that after the presentation. This webcast will be archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, please visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Our speakers today are Josh Sandoval and Jeremy Hurt. Josh serves as HSE Director for JBT Aerotech Airport Services and brings vast knowledge of operations management, emergency management, team leadership, and occupational safety and health to his role. Jeremy is Director of EHS Solutions at ProcessMAP. A certified safety professional, he helps large employers determine the best technology strategy for automating EHS processes and defining the requirements for achieving that strategy. Also with us today is John Cork. John is VP of Marketing at ProcessMAP, where his duties include helping the organization remain an active participant in the EHS community by sharing ideas and practices that drive the profession forward. His background has involved examining how tech helps organizations eliminate risk and improve performance. Again, we thank you all for tuning into this presentation. John's going to get things going for us today. So John, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and take it away.
Let's do it. Thank you, Kevin, for the great intro, and thank you all for being here. I'm really excited, and yes, my profile is intentionally absent from this slide because Josh and Jeremy bring a wealth of knowledge. They've walked the proverbial mile, or perhaps multiple miles. I won't ask them to quantify in this profession, and my role is to sort of keep this dialogue going and largely stay out of the way. But I am excited to be here with you all today. We hope this is a lively and informative session for you. We anticipate having time for your questions at the end, but as Kevin mentioned, pose them at any time, and we'll gather them and we'll get to as many as we can live, and the others we can follow up with you afterwards. So hopefully we're generating questions along the way. That's certainly our intent. So a quick roadmap for today. We're going to touch on 4 areas. In I guess sort of the broad vein of sort of start, stop, continue, right? Looking at the beginning of the calendar year as a really excellent moment in time to take stock of what you're doing, evaluate what other safety teams, other EHS teams are doing that's been successful and effective, and assess whether those can be applied to your business. And again, I'm going to pick the brains on this call with Jeremy and Josh in terms of what they have directly implemented, what they're doing today, and what they have seen work, as well as some of the pitfalls, right? Some of the areas where perhaps another business, like perhaps Josh or Jeremy will share some examples of things that haven't worked and how those might how those might help you avoid that same fate. Quick note before we get into the rest of it, I am from ProcessMAP, as mentioned. If you don't know us, we provide EHS software that helps you get better data, more employee participation, and track accountability and closure for any items that help you improve safety performance. So check us out at processmap.com if you don't know of us and are curious. You can find lots of information, or you know how to reach me. But that's not the purpose of this event. Purpose of the event is to share information. Before we get into the meat of the dialogue here, the panel with Josh and Jeremy, and before I start piping down, we have two questions we want to pose to you. In just a minute, we'll open a poll question. These are short. These aren't sort of scored or tested. This is just to help us, inflect and infuse the conversation with what matters to you. So you should see the poll question up now. First one, we're going to ask you, in your own assessment, right, how engaged are employees in your safety program today? And if you're curious, this is not based on any sort of empirical peer-reviewed methodology. This is just a simple sort of three-set option, and just again, just to help us, shape the dialogue and how to approach this topic, the engagement topic. So we'll leave this open for 30 seconds or so, and then we'll share the results with you. I'd be curious to see if the results match what I would. Yeah. So that doesn't. Those results are, I think, largely in line with what I would have expected. I don't know, Josh, if you have any initial reaction to the responses from the attendees.
Yep. Well, looking at that, and I know that I think I've discussed this in the past with you, John and Jeremy, about worker engagement, right? And we'll probably talk a little bit later on that, but yeah, that's following right about the trend where you see the active coming in at about 45%. There's always that opportunity, right? When you look at the passive and resistance and looking what's the opportunity we can get to move those numbers over to the active and engaged population. So interesting.
Yeah, not a lot of organizations, at least represented on this call, that view this as an extreme liability, right? In terms of that resistant, that skepticism. So that's great to see. But to your point, passive is a good step, but certainly on this call, we'll talk about how do what can you do from a process, from a tool, from a communication standpoint to get people to that active level. So one more poll question, and then I promise we'll get right into the meat of the subject today. So last question is, and I know we're wedging you into a set of choices, so I know that there are other options beyond these choices, but for the purpose of this event, of the 6 priorities that are listed, which in your mind is top? Just select one, and again, we'll leave this open for 30 seconds or so, close it out, and pay out the bets between Josh, Jeremy, and me on who was right. Just kidding. There's no gambling involved in this event. So let's see what they came back at. And incidents is our first topic up today, right? Our first topic up today. So kind of encouraging to see, and we're talking about training as well. So kind of encouraging to see those come up. And Jeremy, I'll pick on you for this one, a little unprompted. I didn't ask you ahead of the event, though I should have, how you thought these results would come back. But how does this line up versus what you would have expected?
I think it's right on where I would have expected. Reducing incidents, most of the time, safety EHS folks are very passionate about people, and reducing incidents. That is all kind of tied into the regulatory compliance, increasing participation. All of those things will kind of wrap into hopefully reducing your incidents. So that's kind of where I would hope it would be. Increasing participation, I think, is another one I would have thought I would have saw a little bit higher. But yeah, this is pretty much where I would expect it to be. Every organization is kind of at their own journey in the safety world. So some of these might be, they might have some of the stuff covered out already and feel really good about employee participation. So maybe they're more focused on automation. So, but this is kind of what I expect.
Yeah, and if I look at it through one lens, process automation and reporting and analytics are really in support of these other initiatives. To your point, the participation and reducing incidents, that's about people, right? Those are the outward practices that ultimately reduce that risk, reduce the risk of harm to your people. So anyway, so reducing incidents is the top priority according to that poll. It is the first topic we wanted to cover with this panel. So we will, without further ado, thank you everyone attending for sort of participating in those. We will now kick things off, talking a little bit about incidents. And the first thing I wanted to sort of start things off with is focus and prioritization, because there's a lot to do, especially at the start of the year, start of the calendar year, and for many of you, it might also be the start of your fiscal year. I want to ask our panel, not all incidents are equal, right? Sort of as my observation around incidents, and so, what are some tips, techniques, and I'll start with you, Josh, that you might employ to help determine where to focus within your incidents and how to start making meaningful strides towards reducing incident rate?
Right, thanks. Yeah, and good to see on the poll, that the incidents are the first priority, and then you can probably, as Jeremy alluded to, where based on the maturity of a company's safety system, where they may have moved up that totem pole of, okay, we've got this under control, now we can move along. So for me, the first thing that I look at to focus on how to reduce incidents is to look at the history, right? Because history is our greatest predictor of the future. And I would really look at the data that's associated with it, analyze that data. Is it, I work in airport services industry where we're working on airports, but I've also worked in manufacturing type environments where you can kind of identify, okay, this work cell or work area is really prone to injuries, and then you can narrow it down to, well, what type of injury is coming out of there. So it's really digging into that data, trending and analyzing that data is really helpful. Also, I like to look at the OSHA top 10s that can be associated in the industry that I'm working in. I'm working in 1910, and so I'll focus on that and then see how that applies to my industry, and then do I have exposure there, kind of line out what that looks like as applying it to us. And then also, digging a little bit deeper into those areas once you've identified it, is kind of looking for the deviation that could happen within that process that would cause somebody to make a localized, rational decision that may be different than the process that's in place. The same reason that you see people working on the top step of a ladder, it's not like they want to be on that top step of a ladder, but they may have a ladder that's too short. It may be the right ladder that's available may be too far away from them. And so you have these production pressures, you have these people kind of gradient to kind of do it the most easy way. And if you think about that, like carrying your groceries into the house, you're going to try and grab all the bags and do it in one go. And then you have, safety saying, well, we need to do it this way. And so if we can make those things more convenient, anyway, looking through the data, I'm kind of unpacking too much, but looking at that data, you can really look at that, and then the process is involved, and then applying that approach really to cater to that efficiency and the convenience to the team members that work in that area. So
it's great. Jeremy, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, I think make sure that as you look back and you reflect on your data and the history, and you go back a couple of years, take a look at some of the corrective actions and the policies and things that were updated as a result of those incidents. Having an incident is bad enough. Having that same incident is a really bad thing. So making sure you're looking at your data. If you have an incident where maybe hopefully you're a little bit higher on the hierarchy of control, but if it's a training issue, did you update your procedures? Did you update your slide decks? Things for the next year with new hires coming in, making sure those type of things have been updated so you can share that and not have to learn that that negative lesson twice. I think training is a big deal. Refreshing training. I used to, when I would do my fire drill training, I would download a YouTube clip from The Office, the show The Office, the fire drill. Short little clip, but it's a good icebreaker. It's a good thing to kind of have people let their guard down. And also, just kind of fresh, change, hopefully you can get into changing the attitude of, oh, it's safety training again, going in there and, maybe having a little fun to start with, and knowing that you have some stuff that you need to accomplish, but it doesn't have to be just straight to it. That's really it for me. And, not to minimize KPIs, but, let's make sure we're focusing on the employees and the people. It's a big deal. There's a sea of KPIs out there that people are really focused on, and every one of those, typically, if it's incident related KPI, then all those have people behind them. So it's easy to kind of get lost in a sea of KPIs and dashboards and those type of stuff. But make sure that you're hopefully taking care of your folks.
Digging into the specific incidents, yeah, that's great. What are some areas that are easy to perhaps underappreciate or miss, that are easy to not spend enough time on? Jeremy, anything that comes to mind for you?
I think changes inside the facility, outside the facility. There's always the weather changes depending on where you're at. But making sure that you're prepared for winter, the winter changes. So we have, you have salt, you have, your snow plows ready to go. Those type of things, making sure if you use a contractor, that you are clear on expectations of when they're going to come in to clear your parking lot. Opposite side, summertime, making, having preparations for Gatorade, for water, sunscreen, cooling towels, all of those, little things that can go missed, or you not be ready to have that supply on hand. And lastly, kind of changes inside the facility. It could be facility layout, could be machinery. Even with times where I've had times where I brought in the exact same machine, but we had a near miss because we had that machine in, it was on a different line, and we added an interlock. Well, when the engineer scoped out the machine for the the new one coming in, that interlock wasn't in place. So now you're kind of setting your employee up for a very bad situation, because they're mentally thinking they're going to open up those doors, and that's going to stop. So really, focus on the changes, making sure MOC process. If you've got a good, strong MOC process, really important. You can catch some of those things, but changes seem to always were always a issue and hard to manage.
I'm going to jump in for a second, because this is a true story of the audience. And this is my first time with Jeremy as a co-presenter, and he's in a weather situation, right? He's in a city that's getting bombarded with rain, and on the prep call, he's going, "All right, everyone." We're taking off his list. I've got a flashlight if the power goes out. I got a generator running. I got my notes. This man is so prepared, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank goodness you come from a safety background. Yeah. What else would you add, Josh, to those suggestions?
So yeah, those were all good things, great things that Jeremy had pointed out, and that does that method, the change program, looking at that, applying that to your organization is definitely a key. Also, I like to look at that at a systems-based approach to safety, and see how other factors come in, and the time that we live in, and I don't want to say the COVID word, but I'll say the post-COVID
Too late.
Society now, where we saw what they call it, the Great Resignation, right? And so there was a shortage of team members, potential candidates for jobs. but looking at how all of that plays into effect, because then you could run into stretching into overtime situations, and there's studies out that show that team members working overtime are at greater risk of having an incident occur, up to 61%. And so when you're able to partner as with HSE with your HR group, if they're doing the hiring, and then your production group, as Jeremy was saying, where in engineering, where you're going in and looking at the HSE aspects of how these all affect the front line, it's very important. It pays dividends to do that, rather than trying to, as an HSE person, kind of work in a vacuum or work in a bubble where you're kind of relegated to going out and just doing quick inspections, and those work. But I think the biggest payoff is when you can partner with those other groups. You can get together, you can talk through some of those changes and some of the problems that you guys are having as an organization, and how that affects safety at the organization.
Great. So if I can sum up, it sort of changes in three facets: changes within your work sites, right? Changes in the exterior of work sites that Jeremy mentioned, weather, et cetera, and then changes in the macroeconomic and hiring environment. To your point, are you running more overtime? Are people coming in more stressed? Is there more illness? Right? And how does that affect sort of shifts and people's alertness, et cetera? That's brilliant. One other angle on incidents, there's a lot of talk, it's been for a long time, about culture, safety culture. Sort of great idea. It's a little abstract for me, right? What are some ways to make that sort of actionable, and how do you see culture? What are some culture tune-ups or culture KPIs, that can help you address incident rates? Josh, you want to kick it off?
Sure. First, whenever I think about culture, and I think about, and I don't know where everyone's organization is. You have a culture curve, right? Of where what that looks like. It can be mapped out and different words used to describe different levels of the engagement that you have for your journey along that culture curve. But first, knowing that you can't manage what you're not measuring, that's important to know. And so if you're at a start off level, you have to start, you have to put that stake in the ground and say, hey, this is where the water level is now, this is how we're moving. But in starting that up, it reminds me of, I think it was in Good to Great, where they describe kind of like the big wheel on The Price is Right. And they say, okay, you can walk into one organization and you can see a great safety culture firing on all cylinders. They're, hazard reporting, they're doing corrective action reporting, they're, doing all of these great proactive safety things. But it doesn't start out like that, right? And just like you see on The Price is Right or the Wheel of Fortune, just to use them. And in that book, Good to Great, they just start about, okay, what it takes, you have to push that wheel at first, and it's it's going to take some effort to start that spinning. And so that's what we're putting that stake in the ground, measuring, identifying KPIs, start measuring where you're at, get those definitions of whatever you think you would like to adopt for your organization if you're just starting out, whether it's going to be described as from the bottom up of vulnerable, are you reactive, or is your organization compliant, proactive and generative. That's what we use because that's a good fit for us. And then you can have scoring in there. Now, I've also heard other terms used to describe different levels of safety and maturity, forced, reactive, you have buy-in and proactive. So again, it's identifying, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but identifying what works best for your organization, and then finding those levels in there for your audit. Hopefully, you're able to have auditing. I know that was a problem, especially during the past, I'm going to say COVID again. that was a past, people weren't traveling.
Participation drops off drastically when you do that. Josh, we keep losing. We're hemorrhaging people every time you say go.
So, well, that was a tough thing, and people weren't traveling as much. A lot of safety people, I for one, travel a lot to go look at site and kind of audit where we're at the site, and then put those corrective actions in place. And so having those metrics built in, and if you score here, that means we're likely in here, and then you have that description that describes where you're at, and then you have, again, that stake in the ground to measure where you're going to be at next year after you put those corrective actions in place.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, right. Have a scale. Use some scale. To your point, have a scale that describes where you are today. You can't. Right. Rome wasn't built in a day, and there are a lot. I've seen several maturity curves. To your point, with similar notions of how to measure them. Anything to add on that topic, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think celebrate your wins. Changing a safety culture is a journey. It's not a destination. Celebrate those wins, because as EHS folks, we know that your job is never done. It's never over. You never finish. You're constantly wanting to improve, constantly wanting to get better. So celebrate those small wins whenever they're at. If you have a risk reduction that you've implemented, celebrate those wins. Let people know about it. Changing a culture, getting participation. It's a lot easier if you have, if you're the winning team. If people see you doing good things, people see, it's easy for fans to get to join bandwagons. You don't want to be the lineman of the EHS world where nobody knows your name until you're giving up a bunch of sacks. So celebrate some of those wins, because you're going to have losses. There are going to be times where things don't work out, but you don't want to be, every time you're stepping in front of your management team, it's to talk about an incident. Make sure you're taking credit for a lot of things you do, and sometimes that's hard. And it's kind of cliche to say build a brand. It's not really your brand. It's not really something you're going to make money off of. But building that safety brand, that safety, kind of getting that momentum going to increase your participation, or have people join, or have people talk to you and engage. Making sure that we're trying to turn a culture that way, and have people join the winning team.
I love it. Everyone wants to win. Speaking of employees, you mentioned employee participation. Let's shift to employee engagement. And Josh, in one of the prep calls, you talked about KPI. Like, what is it? How do you quantify employee engagement? What's a good target? I think you'd mentioned a target you set up at JBT. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. Yeah. And then to try and dovetail into what Jeremy was just saying about celebrating those wins, and it's a lot easier. There's the old adage of you get more bees with honey than vinegar, right? So you want to have that positive culture there, and you want those positive interactions with safety. I think that goes without saying. And so in that, and talking about some of the KPIs we do, and then trying to gain that buy-in to where we can then be engaged and active, and build that proactivity and engagement. We'll let them know that this is your information. We use a transparent system in doing that, and so if there's a concern, that can be seen at all levels of management, and so there is no hiding things in the shadow. Sunlight's the best disinfectant, and so we encourage, we try to gain buy-in that way, and encourage participation through that. We set our KPI targets for things like near misses. We also use our near misses as opportunities for hazard reporting. Because if you really try and fence things in, again, and where we are on our culture maturity level, it needs to be that way, where you can kind of put those together, and then that will, once we progress on, then maybe we can take it apart and use the safety textbook version of a near miss. But just to clear that up, but allow them to use hazard reporting in there. And then we set a participation rate based on head count. And so we use 35% of a site head count per month to get those near misses or hazard reports via a near miss form to be turned in. And then site leadership is very important. Site leadership reviews that, and then the HSE group will review that as well. And I say it's very important that site leadership or the frontline leadership, supervisors, review that, because if I were to tell you that it's turned in a near miss and you don't know anything about where I'm at, and I said, well, there was a team member that was crossing Jones Road at 11 o'clock at night without wearing a safety vest, right? You would say, well, I don't know anything about Jones Road, but knowing that, and I'm here, I have the local knowledge. If I'm a frontline supervisor, I know that that's a 4-lane road where the speed limit's about 50 miles an hour. And so they're at greater risk of getting hit there if they're not wearing some type of reflective or high visibility. So that's why I really try to encourage that, require that those frontline supervisors are looking at those near misses, and then we look through them, because we'll look through for potential SIF related, SIF being severe injury or fatality potentiating events. And so we kind of triage through that, make sure nothing stands out to us, and then we'll go on. So
it's great. And yeah, I love the vivid example of the reason that you want employees reporting and supervisors reviewing it, because there might be stuff not in the incident description per se, but is important for risk assessment. Jeremy, how does technology play a role in getting employees to participate?
I mean, hopefully you're making it easier to report incidents and get them involved. I remember I was working with a maintenance person, and we were talking about an app to report incidents. And I look at this guy, and his fingers are the size of my wrist, they're like giant sausages. And I'm talking to him, and he's like, "You really want me to type something in on my phone?" And I was like, showed him the talk to text feature. Loved it. As long as they could pick up Southern Indiana language with some y'alls thrown in there, he was good to go. So you're gonna have people that are more comfortable with technology, less comfortable with technology. So kind of have a reporting system that encourages all different types to, so you're not alienating maybe your older folks. They aren't as comfortable with technology with logging into an app and reporting an incident. So having a paper-based system for them, having an app, if you have, maybe some of those folks are just great at technology and that's what they want. Just, varying that kind of media where you can input in incidents and get that involvement from everybody in a way that they feel comfortable, I think is a good way to make sure you're getting that participation. So
yeah, and I know that your example earlier, Josh, of the ladder and not wanting to walk further to get the ladder. I've also heard, examples of organizations putting in sort of kiosks at various points in a work environment, right? So that people don't have to go far, just simple things like that. Just what's the level of friction or perceived difficulty for somebody, effort for somebody to go report that incident. That's great. I didn't mean to jump in there. Josh, your other comments on that, that's great. I also wanted to sort of toss out the question around what can go wrong. Right? We all have best intentions with employee engagement, but what can cause somebody to, what can cause an organization to take a step back, perhaps, with participation?
For me, I feel like sometimes we don't close the loop with employees, and sometimes it's harder to do, especially if you're a no blame, no name system where they're reporting stuff anonymously, but not closing that loop with employees if they do report an incident, if they do report a hazard. Sometimes those hazards might take a little bit to alleviate. So letting them know, hey, we have this, we're getting quotes. Keep them involved, keep them engaged, so they're not immediately turned off from the reporting process or from the safety culture or environment where I submitted a hazard and you didn't do anything about it. Following up with them, kind of keeping some good communication so they do feel, and it might be, hey, we can't do that right now. We can't do that. We need to look at addressing it and maybe something a little lower on the hierarchy until you can get some engineering some elimination type fixes in, but closing that loop, making sure they're comfortable, making sure that that you have folks that continue to feel engaged and continue to feel valued.
Yeah, Jeremy, yeah, it's spot on. There's very, it can be frustrating when you're posed with a tough, challenge that it's not just a simple fix out there. But I think nothing is more frustrating to a team member out there where we're saying, okay, you need to report these. We would like you to use this, about having that communication, removing the barriers for communication. But then, just as Jeremy's saying, that follow-up piece, that lets them know that you're listening and engaged in there. You may not have all the answers. It may take getting a group together and kind of putting things together, and then engaging, management on that. If it's not a simple fix, if there's going to be a project that's involved to maybe correct a situation of saying, hey, you may have to do a cost benefit analysis and saying, here's the hazards that are present, here's the the likelihood, running down your risk matrixing, and then showing the potential that could come out from that. And then always when you put that, when you can quantify those numbers, speak those languages with leadership, it goes a lot further. And then you can start putting that against, okay, well, what is profitability, for us? How much money are we going to have to make if an incident occurs in order to pay for the, and so you can kind of go down those like rabbit holes. But again, making sure that when our team members are submitting that information, that it's just not going into the garbage can and that we're reviewing it. Hey, I saw this. That was a good one. Appreciate you, for doing this, for participating, and being able to close that loop. Yep.
That's great. Yeah, the other thing, I'll pick up something because I took a bunch of notes in our prep calls. And Josh, one thing you mentioned also, I jotted down, was around maybe having too high of a standard, that some people, you might get some water spilled on the ground or tea spilled on a desk kind of hazards, and that's okay, as long as you're getting, if you're better to get more and you sift it through. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's one thing I picked up, is better to encourage employees, even if they report some things that are, maybe not earth shattering, just the mere fact of getting that process, that behavior in place will be worth it in the long run. Did I get that right?
Yep. Nope. That's right. There's that builds on the consistency, right? And even though you'll get that, they know the channel to report things. So one day it may not be the water on the floor, or something, I dropped my water bottle or whatever, you'll see. And I'm sure the majority of the folks on this call have seen those in their hazard reporting. But you'll get those. And what that tells me, though, is, hey, they know how to report a hazard. So the one day when something really does happen, they know the channels that are expected. They know how to do that. But getting that together, again, having the clarity there, with the team, those open communication channels that are there, and that the expectations are clear of again, what's expected, what are the repercussions of somebody, that if you're talking fall protection, if they're not wearing fall protection, what are the repercussions? Everybody should know that. And so that's part of that communication, and it needs to be at all levels in there. Also, that commitment to safety, and then again with that consistency of communication.
Great.
Yeah, I think Josh on the prep card, I think you called them diamonds. Like it's a hard process to, mining is a hard process, but when you find diamonds, like that's where it pays off. That is I love that analogy. Just talking through it, and yeah, it makes sense to me that way.
That's going through that SIF process, and I don't know if all, some people may know, but when you start implementing a PSIF or a SIF program at your organization, to eliminate and identify those potential SIF type of incident, yeah, you're mining for diamonds in there. Everyone's seen the safety triangle, right? Whether you're, there's different iterations of that too, where you're 300, I'm just kind of paraphrasing off memory, 300 small incidents, and then you have your 29 or 30, maybe lost time incidents, and then you have your fatality on the top. But below those 300, smaller incidents, there can be 3,000 unsafe behaviors that go into that are never seen. And so that's where our hazard communication and our near miss fits into that, because we know that there's things that are happening out there that would not be identified unless, a supervisor is right there, and they can't always be there. And so you want that culture to where, again, those expectations are communicated. A SIF can go straight to the top without knowing it. So we want to catch those.
Josh, what does that acronym mean again, real quick?
SIF is severe injury or fatality. You can call it it's a PSIF as well, because you're identifying these potential situations or potential deviations from a process that could happen out there, and again, it may take a few different scenarios for that to happen, but identifying those situations is what's key. It's not just I'm driving in the rain, which is arguably inherently dangerous, right? But now if you're driving in the rain, your headlights don't work, and you're going 75 miles an hour down the road, there you're adding those risks in, right? And the dice are rolling, and so you have your greater potential for a severe outcome in the situation. So kind of looking at those and how that applies, but that's the gist of it.
It's great. We've been elaborating a lot, which is great, rich conversation. I'm looking at the clock and there are questions coming in, so we're gonna do lightning round for training and analytics. So training, just one question out to both of you, which is, what are some tips, start of the year, what are one or two tips to getting your training program off to the right start?
For me, it's laying out a plan, having a plan, making sure that that you are not getting behind, not starting off the year getting behind, so that you can kind of develop a consistent cadence to go through your training, even if it's just some micro trainings, very quick learnings that you need to incorporate quick learnings, micro learnings into one overall training topic for the month. Maybe you do it in micro learnings in like a week sessions. But getting off to a good start is going to be key, and helping yourself by leveraging technology out there and making sure that you're getting notifications on whether it's someone needs to have their forklift evaluation redone. Tracking that for individuals, large organizations without some kind of notification is tough. So kind of developing and utilizing technology for those aspects is great.
Great point. Josh, anything else?
Yep. Sure. Yeah, I typically look at, again, with the data, if there's something there that leads me to believe that there's a training gap there, I may take that as an opportunity to say, hey, we need to revisit this training this month. But definitely staying on top of, like Jeremy's saying, your regulatory compliance is first in that triage, and then anything you would deem maybe coming through your data as far as near misses that you're reviewing, some of those things, BBO observations, if hopefully your organizations are doing those. But if you identify trends in there, I think that's what we really look at when we're looking at, okay, what are some other opportunities for training out there? And if it's PPE or ergonomic, then we may say, okay, let's call an audible and let's do some training here. And to Jeremy's point, the micro learning stuff, I always encourage for shift startups to start with a toolbox talk. And when you can do that, if you're able to document it, it's even better, right? Because for regulatory compliance, if you don't document it, didn't happen. And so unfortunately, right? But trying to encourage the documentation of, what you're talking about in these safety talks, in these briefings, and then at the opportunity, you're able to either do training, computer-based training or in-person training is great, but we're kind of using those, your BBOs, regulatory compliance as your compass to identify, okay, where, what are some areas we need to look at?
Perfect. All right. One question on KPIs, and then I do see some questions coming in, so we'll turn to those. If you're in the audience, you have something you want to pose to Josh or Jeremy, pose to all of us, feel free to chime in now in the Q&A feature. Leading indicators. We talked a lot about some prep calls. What are some things, if you haven't made the shift to leading indicators as an organization, you want to, one or two sort of techniques or considerations in order to make that effective?
Right. So
Go ahead.
Go
ahead,
John. I'll jump on.
Ahead, brother.
You jumped on the last one real quick.
Okay. Go ahead.
Jonathan didn't say, Josh, I'll go with you. So I'll jump on this one real quick. So for leading indicators, right, you're going to identify your key performance indicators. So we all know, we're not looking at leading indicators. All we're looking at is our lagging indicators, our injuries, incidents, things that happen. I believe it's Cannibal Institute that puts out a great document where you can go in and kind of identify leading indicators based on where your focus areas are. That may be near misses, like we've done, and we said, okay, well, let's look at this. BBOs, we also look at that for leading indicators. We look at coaching sessions, and in those opportunities in there, and whether it's a for lack of a better term, negative or a positive coaching session in there. They're not, when we rolled that out, there was a big confusion of these coaching sessions. Are they disciplinary action? And so, no, this is not disciplinary action. What I found myself was being frustrated when I would go do a safety walk and tell somebody, well, hey, you're supposed to be having this type of PPE in this area. It's required. And go back, a week or 2 weeks later, or even a month or so later, and you've had that conversation, and it helps you to support, okay, I know I've talked to you before about this, but those coaching sessions, and when you can make them into positive, hey, you did this, you did this exactly right, that's great. And you just would use a coaching session in that. Again, it shows that you're engaged as a supervisor and a manager, and you encourage. What we do is we have our supervisors and leads use those as well as managers. But then when you can quantify that and say, okay, how many coaching sessions? Because what you don't want to happen is to look up and have an incident and say, well, why did this happen? Do we need to punish or have disciplinary action on the team member? But when you start going into that, you want to make sure that there are these sessions in there, these coaching sessions that are in there, where it's where now it gives you a little bit more history on the way that the front line is working, the way that safety is engaged on the front line. So again, you could use those as KPIs, but you can also fine tune them down the road and say, okay, well, we want to look at the on-time preventive maintenance of machines. We want to look at the production output. We know that this is a safe quantity of widgets to produce in this amount of time, but when we go above here, we know that risks are being taken or overtime's in place and things like that. And so you can actually put more numbers to it, and that data will start to talk to you a little bit more.
Jeremy, last word.
Yeah, I love Josh through the Campbell the Campbell Institute out there. Great source. One of my favorite KPIs that I've used is percentage of safety hazards or safety actions closed in a time frame. You're kind of accomplishing two things. You're fixing hazards there, but then you're also going back and you're able to follow up with employees. Once again, kind of get that safety culture rolling through, and keep everybody involved.
That's right. Yeah, and I know with our own data, we have the benefit of aggregating data across organizations to use our software, and we had found that one of the strongest correlations with reduced incidents, right, was closure of near-miss action items, right, on-time closure. Organizations that close those near-miss action items at a higher rate have a steeper decline in recordable incidents, right? So to your point, it's meaningful because predictive is the wrong word, but it has a linkage. It has a strong linkage. So that's great. Questions are coming in. We got about 10 minutes. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we can do our best to sort of cover as many as we can. So one question out of the gate here, and I think we might have touched on this a little bit around the conversation around SIFs and looking at certain types of incidents as sort of having more weight. But one of the questions from the audience is it better to focus on risk rather than a number as it relates to incidents?
For me, I would just kind of generally, not without the specifics again, I would look at the risk, right? That's in so you have, when you look at a risk matrix, you have the severity, right? And then you have the probability in which it'll happen. The SIF, following that definition and kind of the criteria underneath is that the severe injury is you're going to, put someone's life in danger, head injury type of stuff, loss of blood, that type of, without getting to, but those life-threatening type of outcomes into it, or it could change someone's lifestyle, right? Amputation type hazards, loss of eyesight type hazards, I would put into that scope of SIF, and I would look more at the risk in there rather than numbers coming through. Kind of broadly speaking, again, if it's a bunch of maybe ergonomic type of problems where it's sprain strain, they're going to get lower priority for me, though that may be the pain point. But when I'm mining for diamonds on SIF, yes, we can solve that problem, or we could put things in place, max lift weights and things like that for ergonomic issues. But when we're talking about life-saving type of incident, you want to stay within that criteria and focus on what we can do to change that process, or what needs to happen in order to prevent that potential SIF. That answer the question, I hope.
I think so. And if the audience has more questions around that topic, we'll see, because people will pop them in. So yeah, feel free to keep them coming. Again, we'll get a log of these, and if we don't get to you, and we won't get to all of them, we can follow up with additional information. Here's another one that sort of caught my attention, which is how do you avoid the perception of sort of being patronizing to staff, right? While sort of trying to prevent them from doing things that might not seem rational. Like, how do you have that communication, or how do you become I guess a peer or a collaborator versus sort of police? Any responses from you guys?
Avoid being, did you say police, avoid being the safety police?
Yeah, the term of the question was patronizing, so I
use that all the time. No, that's, if you're the safety cop, right? If you notice on the highway, right, and I think everybody should know that they only slow down. Traffic only slow down when the police officer's there, and then when they're not. So that's the same thing, right? When you're a safety person. Jeremy, I didn't mean to jump in on this, but it's funny because I use that term all the time, and it's building those relationships with the team members. I think one of the biggest things is being down to earth as a safety person. It's not me against anyone out there. I happen to be in this position. This is my job. I'm a partner with them to make sure that they go home safe to their families every night. The last thing I want is for somebody to go home injured or worse. And so that's my mission, and that's what I work to do every day. So.
Yeah, I think for me, Jonathan, Josh is spot on. Building those relationships, and I think we're really coming into an interesting time, kind of in the industrial manufacturing construction era, where a lot of people don't have some of the experiences that their peers might have had. A lot of there's a skill gap that is if it's not here, it's developing rather quickly. For instance, I had a person, they were told to go clean out an electrical panel. This is way back in the day. Clean out the bottom of an electrical panel. Our maintenance manager just happened to walk by right before they took a hose to clean out a 480 electrical panel. So it's tough because you want to make sure that you'll get all your stuff covered in training, but you're also there's some basic expectations that I think as we get into the kind of a new era in industrial health and safety, we really need to make sure that we're covering off the basics too, because people's different experiences, they might not know what most of us would assume as common knowledge.
Yeah, don't carry assumptions. We have time probably for one more question, then we'll have to wrap up. One of the questions, and this is near and dear to us because one of the application, one of the software modules we provide is for incident reporting and making that consistent. But one question in amongst the mix there, Jeremy, was what are 3 core questions to incident reporting? I don't know if you want to touch on that at all.
Yeah, I always like to start off my incident reporting or incident investigation with asking the employee kind of to walk me back through the incident, and then from there you might develop a kind of your standard incident questions to walk through. Were they wearing, depending on the incident, were they wearing PPE? Have they been trained? Those type of things. How long they've been doing the job? Were they working overtime? You get into what happened with body parts and scrapes and all that kind of stuff. But really just kind of collecting that data, and it's great if you have a system that you can kind of have that consistent data going in. So then you can aggregate it. You can look at it. You can go back and look for trends and do analysis on what you're seeing from an incident standpoint. But they're a basic set of questions might change all the time, and you might have to adapt some of your incident investigations to what you were doing. For incident investigation for a near miss versus an injury versus your kind of environmental release, are all going to a lot of times be different. So just having some of that flexibility and being able to adapt to what you're looking at or what you're trying to improve.
Great, you came right on time, and the 3 of us, you two could talk shop all day, but I want to make sure people have a minute to get to their next meetings. So we'll kick it back over to Kevin and the NSC team. This has been a great discussion, and thank you all for joining in. Kevin.
Excellent. No, we thank the 3 of you. Just a great job. Really appreciate your insights and expertise. As indicated, we are running short on time. As we close, though, just want to let everyone know about the evaluation survey that we're asking you to complete. That survey will open in a different screen after this webinar. We really appreciate that input. It's important to help us improve our future webcasts. Sorry that we did not get to every question today, but all the unanswered questions will be forwarded along to our speakers today. With that, we end today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. We'd like to thank Josh Sandoval, Jeremy Hurt, John Cork, everyone at ProcessMAP, and all of you who listened in. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.